Yaron Lively had no idea what the hell he was doing in a dimly lit neighborhood pub on a Thursday night, but here he was sitting under a battered neon sign that read, "The Poor House," sipping a whiskey he didn't order himself, and staring at a trivia sign-up sheet like it was written in Greek. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. He wore a navy button-down shirt that probably cost more than the table he was sitting at, his watch glinting under the flickering light above. He hadn't walked into a place this casual in years. His assistant, Paul, had dared him go somewhere normal. No penthouse lounges, just people's stuff, right. Yaron had built his tech company from the ground up, sold it before 30, and now owned half of a luxury real estate firm. He didn't do normal anymore. But Paul had also said the pub had killer trivia nights, and maybe, just maybe, he could stop working for 5 minutes and have a little fun. He was just about to walk out when he heard her voice. "All right, nerds and know-it-alls, grab your drinks and your dignity trivia night starts in 5. Yaron turned toward the stage. The woman holding the mic had a messy ponytail, a clipboard in one hand, and confidence pouring out of every word she said. She wore jeans, sneakers, and a red t-shirt that said, "I'm silently judging your answers." Her laugh was loud, real, and when she smiled, it hit him square in the chest. She had no idea who he was. For the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing. "Name's Geneva," she said, scanning the crowd. "I'll be your trivia host, your emotional support human, and your judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to wrong answers. Let's do this." Yaron blinked. Geneva, he didn't know her, but he wanted to. He watched as she moved through the crowd, cracking jokes, handing out pencils, laughing with strangers like she'd known them forever. She was magnetic. The kind of woman who made you forget to check your phone. The kind of woman who made everything else in the room fade out. She stopped at his table. "You playing solo tonight?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Is that allowed?" he asked back. Geneva gave him a once-over. "Sure, but I should warn you we've got a couple of regulars who take trivia very seriously. Like shouting obscure scientific facts kind of serious." "I think I can handle it," Yaron said, fighting a smile. Geneva grinned. "All right, mystery man, what's your team name?" He paused. "Lone Wolf," she scribbled it down. "Edgy." "I like it." And then she moved on, leaving him with a pencil, a scorecard, and the weirdest feeling in his chest. Trivia started. Geneva fired off questions with energy and sass, pacing the front of the room like she was born to be on stage. Yaron didn't know half the answers, but he didn't care. He was too busy watching her, the way her nose crinkled when someone gave a stupid guess, the way her laugh filled every corner of the pub. She was alive in a way he hadn't been around in years. After the third round, she called him out. "Lone Wolf, you're surprisingly good at 90s sitcoms. You got a secret friend's obsession." Yaron leaned back in his chair. "Wouldn't you like to know?" The crowd laughed. Geneva tilted her head, amused. "I would actually." After the final round, Geneva announced the winner, an older couple that high-fived like they'd just won the lottery. Yaron came in third. She handed him a $10 gift card to the bar. He took it with a shrug. "Guess I'll have to come back." "Guess you will," she said, holding his gaze a second longer than necessary. As people filtered out, Yaron lingered by the bar. Geneva was packing up her clipboard and Sharpies. "You do this every week?" he asked casually. "Every Thursday for the last 4 years. Pays the bills and keeps me out of trouble." He raised an eyebrow. "You host trivia to pay bills and bartend, and teach piano to kids who think Beethoven is a dog. I'm a woman of many gigs." Yaron leaned against the bar. "You're good at this. Trivia?" "No, holding a room. Making people laugh, making a guy forget he's terrible at geography." Geneva looked at him then, really looked. "You're not from around here, are you?" "What gave it away?" "The shoes. They cost more than my rent," he chuckled. "Fair," she smirked. "So what's your deal, Lone Wolf? You some kind of bored hedge fund guy slumming it in local bars for kicks?" He hesitated. "Something like that." She narrowed her eyes. "You're not gonna tell me, are you?" "Not yet." Geneva rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "All right, man of mystery. Maybe I'll see you next week." "You will," he said, without hesitation. He meant it. As he walked out into the crisp night, he checked his watch out of habit, not because he needed to be anywhere. For once, he wasn't thinking about meetings or mergers or the next deal. He was thinking about Geneva, and how, somehow, a trivia night in a random pub had just become the best part of his week. Yaron was back the next Thursday, this time 15 minutes early. He didn't know what he expected, maybe that Geneva would notice him sooner, or that sitting at the same table would somehow recreate the ease of last week, but the pub was buzzing in a way it hadn't been before. More people, louder music, the scent of fried food thicker in the air. And Geneva wasn't on stage this time. She was behind the bar, elbow deep in drink orders, hair tied up in a knot that looked like it had been done mid-sprint. He watched her scribble something on a pad, slide a glass across the bar, then duck under the counter to grab a fresh bottle of gin. "You're early," she said, without looking up. Yaron blinked. "How did you even see me? You're 6 foot something, and everyone else in this place is underlit and underpaid. You stand out." He laughed once. "Fair." Geneva finally looked at him, eyes flickering with something unreadable. "You playing tonight or just here to judge my bartending?" "I came for the trivia. The bartending's just a bonus." She handed off another drink, then glanced at the clock. "I've got 10 minutes before game time. Want to help me carry ice?" "Ice. Big plastic bucket. Cold, heavy." "Builds character." Yaron followed her through the swinging door behind the bar into a cramped back room lined with shelves and a humming ice machine. She set a scoop into a bin, then handed him a bucket. "I don't usually do manual labor on Thursdays," he said, filling it. She leaned against the wall. "What do you usually do?" Yaron hesitated. "Meetings, calls, strategy sessions, more meetings." "That sounds aggressively boring." "It is." She tilted her head. "So why are you really here?" "I told you, trivia. Try again." Yaron looked at her. "You," Geneva blinked just once, then grabbed the other bucket. "You always that direct?" "Only when I mean it." She didn't answer, just walked back out with the ice. He followed, unsure if he'd pushed too far or not far enough. The game began a few minutes later, and Geneva was back in her element, sharp, quick, commanding the room with a kind of chaotic grace that made it impossible to look away. This time, he wasn't alone. A pair of 20-somethings had asked to join him, and he'd said yes mostly to avoid looking like a stalker. They weren't bad teammates. One of them had an encyclopedic knowledge of 90s video games, and the other remembered every Oscar winner from the last 15 years. Yaron contributed where he could, but mostly he watched Geneva. During a break between rounds, she walked by his table. "Lone Wolf's got a pack now. I'm evolving," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "Careful. Next thing you know, you'll be buying custom team shirts and arguing over punctuation." "Is that a thing? You'd be surprised how many friendships end over semicolons." He leaned forward slightly. "What about you? Ever play or just host?" "I used to play. Years ago." "What changed?" She hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Hosting pays more." She left before he could ask anything else. The rest of the night passed in a blur of questions and laughter and the occasional shout of disbelief when someone guessed something ridiculous. Yaron's team came in second. Geneva handed over a $20 bar tab and said nothing as she did, but her fingers brushed his for half a second longer than necessary. The pub emptied slowly. Yaron waited until she was wiping down the bar again. "You get off late?" he asked. "Depends. Some nights I close, some nights I get lucky and only have to mop up one spilled beer and 2 broken hearts. Tonight, just beer." She paused. "What are you doing after?" He straightened. "I was thinking about walking you home." Geneva didn't answer right away. "Then, you always make a habit of offering to walk strangers home, only the ones who make Thursday the best day of my week." She rolled her eyes, but a smile tugged at her lips. "You're ridiculous." "Is that a yes?" She tossed her rag into the sink. "Give me 10 minutes." They walked out together, the air crisp and quiet, the streetlights casting long shadows on the damp pavement. She led him down a narrow side street lined with closed shops and the occasional glowing window. "So," she said, hands in her jacket pockets, "are you ever going to tell me what you actually do?" "No," she looked at him. "Seriously, it's not interesting." "I highly doubt that." He stopped walking. "If I tell you, will you promise not to Google me?" She stopped too. "That depends." "Are you a magician, a cult leader, a former child star?" "Worse," he said. "I built and sold a tech company. Now I invest in luxury real estate and hide from people who want me to speak at conferences." She stared at him. "Still want me to walk you home?" She turned. You don't talk like a millionaire. I don't dress like one either, not when I'm here. They resumed walking. Why not? She asked after a beat. Because when people know they treat me differently, they want something. Geneva glanced sideways at him. And you think I don't? I think you haven't asked for anything except help with ice. They arrived at a brick building with ivy climbing up one side and a cracked intercom box. Geneva stopped at the door. This is me, he nodded. Good night, Geneva, she hesitated. Want to know something? Always. I almost didn't come in last week. I was late, annoyed, had a migraine, but I did. And then you showed up in that ridiculous shirt looking like you'd accidentally wandered into the wrong world. He smiled. Maybe I did. Geneva stepped inside the doorway but didn't shut it. See you next Thursday. You already know the answer. The door clicked shut behind her and Yaron stood there a moment longer, the hum of traffic in the distance, the ghost of her voice still in his ears. Something had shifted, and he wasn't sure he wanted it to shift back. Yaron didn't wait until Thursday. By Monday evening, he was back at the poorhouse, standing outside with a box under his arm and no idea whether she'd be there. The sidewalk was damp from a light rain, and the pub's windows glowed amber against the growing dusk. He hesitated only long enough to feel ridiculous, then pushed open the door. The place was quieter than on trivia nights, a handful of regulars hunched over pints, a couple playing pool near the back. Behind the bar, Geneva was stacking tumblers. Her hair was down, curling slightly at the ends, and she wore a faded hoodie with paint flecks on the sleeve. She glanced up and blinked. You're early by about 3 days. I brought something, Yaron said, holding up the box, her eyes narrowed. Is that a bribe? No, it's a thank you. For what? For not asking any of the obvious questions. She raised an eyebrow. I'm not following. Most people, when they find out what I do, start asking about margins or IPOs or who I know in Silicon Valley. You didn't. I figured if you wanted to talk about work, you would have led with it. And that, he said, setting the box on the bar, is exactly why you're getting this. Geneva wiped her hands on a towel and opened the box with cautious fingers. Inside was a vintage trivia game still in its original packaging, one of those collector's editions with a worn cardboard map and brass tokens. She touched the edge of the board. Where did you even find this? An antiques dealer in Chelsea. I called in a favor. She looked up. Why? Because I saw you light up when you talked about playing, and I figured, maybe one night you'd want to play again, just for fun. Geneva closed the box slowly. You tracked down a discontinued trivia game for me. I did. That's either incredibly thoughtful or deeply unhinged, maybe both. She leaned on the bar, studying him. What would we bet? What do you want? She tapped the box. If I win, you tell me your most embarrassing moment in public. And if I win, she considered. I'll answer one question, anything, he nodded. Deal. Geneva shook her head with something between disbelief and quiet amusement. You're not like anyone I've met. Maybe you've been meeting the wrong people. She turned toward the shelves behind her. You want a drink, mystery man, he smiled. Surprise me. She poured something golden and smooth, slid it across the bar, then pulled out a chair from the other side. We'll play after close. Yaron stayed until midnight. They played at a back table, the pub lights dimmed, the jukebox humming faintly in the background. Geneva was ruthless, fast, sharp, and competitive in a way that made Yaron laugh more than he had in months. They traded jabs, debated answers, and fought over absurd questions about early cinema and obscure capitals. She won barely. He leaned back, arms crossed. All right, a deal's a deal. Geneva grinned, triumphant. Let's have it, your most humiliating public failure. Yaron exhaled. I once gave a keynote speech at a global tech summit with my shirt on inside out. No one told me for an hour. I was on stage, cameras, live stream, everything. The neckline tag was flapping like a flag of shame. She covered her mouth, laughing. That's beautiful. I was 29. I haven't worn that brand since. Geneva wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. You just became 10% more human. I'll take it. She looked at the board, then at him. Want to know something? Always. I haven't played this game since college, not like this, not. For the hell of it. Why did you stop? Life got messy and expensive, and I stopped doing things that didn't help me survive. He was quiet for a moment. You're not surviving right now. No, you're living. She met his gaze, and for a second the air between them felt charged with something fragile and unspoken. Then she stood. "I should lock up." He helped her clean, stacking chairs and wiping down tables. It felt oddly normal, comfortable. Like they'd done it a dozen times before. As they stepped outside, the street was empty. The rain had stopped, leaving everything slick and reflective. She pulled her hoodie tighter against the cold. "I could walk you home," he offered again. "I live 2 blocks that way." "Then I'll walk 2 blocks. Geneva looked up at him, hesitant. "Yaron," he waited. "I like this, whatever this is, but I'm not someone who fits into a penthouse. I'm not asking you to." She searched his face. "Then what are you asking?" He stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that the space between them cracked open. "I'm asking if I can see you tomorrow. No trivia, no bar, just us." Geneva didn't answer for a heartbeat. "Then, I've got a morning piano lesson, but I'm free after one. I'll pick you up," she nodded. "Okay." He turned to go, but she caught his sleeve. "Hey," he looked back. "I don't care about the money. I care that you came back on a Monday with a box that probably cost more than my rent just because I said I used to play a game." Yaron didn't answer. He didn't have to. She let go. And this time, she was the one who watched him walk away. Yaron stood in front of Geneva's building the next day, holding 2 cups of coffee and a paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and butter. He didn't text or knock, just waited, knowing she'd said 1 o'clock. At precisely 2 minutes past, the door swung open. Geneva stepped out wearing a denim jacket and a long burgundy scarf, her hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. She paused when she saw him, then broke into a slow, cautious smile. "What's in the bag?" she asked. 2 croissants, 1 almond, 1 chocolate." "I didn't know which you liked." She took the bag and peeked inside. "You bought both just to be safe. I like options." Geneva handed him one of the croissants and took a sip of her coffee. "This isn't from that place on the corner." "No, I drove uptown this morning. There's a bakery near the park that imports their flour from France. Supposedly." She gave him a sideways glance. "You drove uptown for croissants. I've done more for less." They walked side by side toward the subway entrance, then veered off toward the park instead. The city felt quieter during the day, like the noise had taken a lunch break of its own. Trees rustled with the early November breeze, and somewhere in the distance, a saxophone player hit a sour note and kept playing. Geneva found an empty bench beneath a fading maple tree. "So where are we going?" "Somewhere you've never been," Yaron said. "That's vague." "It's supposed to be." She studied him. "You're not going to tell me." "No, but I promise it doesn't involve trivia spreadsheets or client dinners." She narrowed her eyes. "If you say yacht, I'm walking back home." Yaron grinned. "No yachts, but I'll need you to trust me for the next hour." She hesitated, then stood. "Lead the way." They walked toward the street where a sleek black car waited at the curb. The driver opened the door without a word. Geneva stepped in, glancing around the interior like she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch anything. As the car pulled away, she glanced at him. "So what's the catch?" "There isn't one. There's always a catch. Not today." After 20 minutes of weaving through traffic and crossing into a quieter part of the city, the car stopped in front of a narrow brick building with tall windows and a small brass plaque beside the door. Geneva read it aloud. "New York Sound Conservatory." He met her gaze. "Come on." Inside, the space smelled like old wood and polish. A man greeted them in the hallway, shaking Yaron's hand before disappearing down a corridor. Geneva followed silently as they were led to a room near the back, a high-ceilinged studio with soft lighting, rows of string instruments on the walls, and a glossy baby grand piano in the center. She froze at the doorway. Yaron stepped beside her. "You've been teaching piano. I figured maybe you haven't had a chance to just play. No kids, no parents hovering, no broken keys." Geneva looked around the room with something like reverence. "This is a private conservatory. I have a friend on the board. He owed me a favor. You called in a favor for this. I wanted to hear you play." She didn't move at first. Then she crossed slowly to the piano, trailing her fingers along the polished surface before sitting down. Her hands hovered over the keys for a long moment, as if she wasn't sure they'd still work. Then she played. Not a scale. Not a warm-up. A piece Yaron didn't recognize, fluid and aching and full of something that felt like memory. Her fingers moved with certainty, her body still except where it had to move to reach the higher notes. He didn't say a word, afraid even breathing would break the spell. When she finished, the silence that followed felt sacred. Geneva exhaled. I haven't played like that in years. You never told me you were that good. I didn't want to sound like I was bragging. You weren't. You were underselling. She turned on the bench to face him. I started college as a music major, piano performance. I had plans. What happened? My mom got sick, bills piled up. I dropped out, moved back here, started picking up whatever work I could. She looked at the piano. Eventually, playing stopped feeling like a thing I got to do. It became something I had to do. Yaron sat beside her, not touching, just close. I know what that's like, he said. To take something you love and turn it into something that just keeps you afloat. Geneva looked at him. What did you lose? My brother. He was older, smarter. I built the company after he died. I needed to feel like I could control something, that I could make the world make sense. She didn't ask how, she just listened. He continued. I kept building, and when I had everything, I realized I didn't know what to do with any of it. The money, the silence, the time, and then you wandered into a pub full of weirdos and trivia addicts, and found someone who made the silence stop. Geneva's voice was quiet. You don't owe me grand gestures, I know. You don't have to fix anything. I don't want to fix you, Geneva. I just want to be part of what you build next. She closed the piano lid gently. I don't know what that is yet. That's okay. I'm not going anywhere. Later, they walked out together under a sky streaked with pink and gold. As he helped her into the car, she looked at him suddenly with something in her eyes he hadn't seen before, not amusement, not hesitation, something closer to certainty. Yaron, he turned. I think I like Thursdays because of you. I think I like every day because of you. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't dramatic or desperate, just quiet, certain, real. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his. I don't know how this fits into my life. We'll make space. No mansions, no press, no pretending, just us, he said. Just us, she echoed. And when they pulled away, when the car disappeared into the slow roll of the city, Geneva was still holding the strap of her bag with one hand and touching her lips with the other, like she was still trying to believe it had happened. She didn't need to, because it had. And it was only the beginning. Geneva stood in her tiny kitchen, flipping through the worn pages of her notebook, chewing the end of a pencil like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. The notes were mostly lesson plans, scattered reminders, and a list of upcoming recitals for her students. But at the bottom of the page, in her own messy handwriting, was a question she hadn't meant to write. Would I move for him? The thought had arrived uninvited, but now that it was there, it wouldn't leave. Yaron had never asked her to. He hadn't hinted at it, hadn't dangled luxury or comfort like bait. But things had changed. A lot. And not just between them. 2 weeks had passed since the piano conservatory, since the kiss, since she'd let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she could want more than survival. And now she stood here, barefoot on cold tile, wondering what the hell that meant. The buzzer rang. She opened the door to find Yaron standing on the steps in a charcoal gray hoodie and jeans, holding a small potted plant with a crooked wooden sign that read, "Don't die." She blinked. Is this a passive-aggressive gift? He stepped inside. You said you can't keep anything alive that doesn't scream when it's hungry. She took the plant. It's actually cute. He leaned against the counter. You looked like you were thinking too hard when you opened the door. Want to talk about it? She looked at him, then set the plant on the windowsill. I got offered a full-time teaching job at a music studio, real salary, health insurance. A full roster of students. That's amazing. It's in San Diego. The silence that followed wasn't stiff or cold. It was the kind that settled between people who cared too much to pretend. I didn't apply, she added. One of my old professors from college recommended me. They called this morning. Yaron didn't move. Do you want it? That's the problem. I don't know. It's the kind of opportunity I never thought I'd get again, but everything in me feels like it's happening at the wrong time. Because of us, she nodded. He walked toward her then, slow and careful, like he knew the weight of her decision and didn't want to tip it. I'm not going to ask you to stay, I know. And I'm not going to say I'll move across the country tomorrow. I wouldn't let you. But I will say this, he said. gently brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I don't want this to end. I don't want to go back to a life where I don't see you. Geneva's voice was quiet. I don't want that either. So let's figure it out. She looked up at him. You mean long distance? I mean something better. I've been thinking about opening a creative space. A building for musicians, painters, dancers. A place where people can make things, teach, perform. I've been looking at properties. Her brow furrowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know how real it was until now, I want you to run it. She stared at him. I'm serious, he said. You'd have full control, build your own program, bring in your students, set your own terms. That sounds like freedom, he finished, the kind you deserve. Geneva pressed her hands to her face, then dropped them. That would mean quitting the bar. And stepping away from every backup job I've patched together. And stepping toward the life you should have had all along. She laughed under her breath. You always do this. Do what? Make impossible things feel possible. They're not impossible, he said. Not when you're in the picture. Later that night, they sat on the couch with Chinese takeout containers resting on their knees. The plant sat precariously balanced on a stack of books near the window. Geneva reached over and flicked the little sign. I'm going to say yes. Yaron looked at her. To your offer, she clarified. Not San Diego, I want to stay here with you. He didn't speak for a moment. When he did, his voice was soft. You sure? She nodded. I've spent so much of my life waiting for the next disaster. I don't want to make decisions out of fear anymore. I want to build something with you. He took her hand. Then let's build it. 3 months later, the former warehouse on Delancey Street had been transformed. The exposed brick walls were now lined with soundproofed studios. A small recital hall sat on the second floor, with velvet chairs and a baby grand piano that looked nearly identical to the one she'd played that day. Yaron insisted on keeping the building's industrial charm, but Geneva had added her own touch plants in every corner, mismatched mugs in the lounge, a chalk wall covered in musical quotes. On opening night, the place was packed. Parents, students, fellow artists. Geneva wore a navy blue dress that hugged her waist and fell just above her knees. Her hair was twisted back in a loose braid, and her eyes scanned the crowd with a mix of nerves and joy. Yaron stood at the back, dressed in a dark suit with no tie, his collar unbuttoned and a single red rose in his hand. When she spotted him, she smiled in a way that made the whole room disappear. After the final student performance, Geneva stepped on stage. This place, she said, her voice steady, exists because someone believed in what I had to offer before I did. She looked directly at Yaron. And because of that, I get to stand here, not as a survivor, but as someone who's finally living the life she once thought she'd lost. So thank you. All of you, but especially you. She left the stage to a round of applause, but only one person mattered. Yaron met her in the wings, pulling her into his arms before she could say a word. I'm proud of you, he whispered. I'm proud of us, she said. He held out the rose. I was saving this for after, but now seems right. She took it, holding it close. You always know what, how to show up for me. He kissed her then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that didn't ask questions because it already knew the answers. Outside, the city bustled. But inside the studio, Geneva and Yaron stood still, wrapped in each other, the future wide open in front of them. The next morning, they drank coffee on the rooftop of his building, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the sky bleed into gold. Geneva traced a line along the edge of her mug. I never thought I'd get this, she said. This, a life that fits, a man who listens, a home that doesn't feel borrowed. Yaron turned to her, brushing his thumb along her cheek. You didn't get it, he said. You built it. And I was lucky enough to be part of it. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder, the city below them waking up. No more hiding, no more wondering, no more waiting for things to fall apart. They had chosen each other, and they were exactly where they were meant to be. Forever.